I think a lot of people are confused about why there is a conflict in Gaza right now, and maybe some on both sides. It is not a religious war. All right. A lot of people think it's a religious war. And they'll say this has been going on for 2,000 years. It hasn't been going on for 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, Titus, leading the Roman army, kicked all the Jews out of Israel after Israel tried to do a rebellion thing and lost. And since then, Jews have been scattered throughout Europe and for a long time through the Middle East up until the last century. For most of that time, a lot of them were living in areas like Iran, and the ones that weren't in Europe were like in Iran or Turkey or Egypt. They were, and the Ottoman Empire actually did not persecute Jews, even though it was a Muslim empire. And they had something called people that were of the book. And there were three kinds of people of the book. And there were Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And Christians and Jews did not have the same rights as Muslims. I'm not going to say they are, but they were allowed to kind of self-regulate. They had their own like little kind of internal government that still answered to the Ottoman government. But for the most part, it's like a local, like a state government or something, where they were allowed to more or less self-govern. And they were allowed religious freedom. They could pray. They could do whatever they wanted. There was no religious conflict. Then in the Ottoman Empire started to wane around the, like in the 19th century, it started to wane. So in the 1850s, they passed a series of land laws. And the reason they were passing these land laws is so they could get more taxes. And they needed more taxes because they were waning. One of these laws allowed, like without getting into a bunch of details, but allowed a bunch of oligarchs to basically declare land as theirs that wasn't theirs. And then another one of these laws allowed for them to sell this land to people overseas. And so they were selling land to Jewish people who were, in the same course of time over 2,000 years in Europe, were being persecuted. And there's no stop acting, like some people act like Jews weren't persecuted until Hitler came along. There's a reason Hitler made the Jews their scapegoat. They were the easiest, lowest hanging fruit. And so what happened is, like they would like just for thousands of years, every time something went wrong, they blamed the Jews. If a plague came along, it's because the Jews poisoned the well, literally. If there was some kind of financial thing, what happened is that there was, like the Catholic Church wouldn't allow you to lend money. It was like against the law to lend money if you were a Christian, right? And so only Jews were allowed to lend people money. And they were the money lenders. Like literally, this is where the whole Jews own the world stereotype comes from. This is the trope. I don't think people know where this trope comes from, because it's actually really fascinating, right? Like the reason that Jews were the money lenders is because that's literally the only job that they were allowed to have. And they were the only ones allowed to do it. And so that's what they did, is they were the bankers. They were the money lenders. And then if things went bad, it was their fault. They were the ones that were running everything, and they were the ones secretly in charge because they had all the money. And so what would happen is, whatever king or queen was running the show that day would, like kick out all the Jews out of the country and take away their debt. And they'd seize the debt owed to that, Jewish person. They didn't get to leave with all their money. They got to leave with their lives, and that was it. And this was happening for thousands of years. So the Jews, they all went to Israel. They started buying the land and going to Israel. And I think it was, and there was a series of things that happened. And then in World War I, there was like the British Empire was like making different promises to different people, and they had made one promise to the Muslim, or to the Palestinians. Hey, if you join us, then you can have a state afterwards. You can have your own state. And then they told the Jews that they could have their own state. And then they also were carving up the whole area between them and France and some other countries. And guess what happened? Guess Israel didn't get a state. Palestine didn't get a state. And really the only solution that was, I think his name was Montgomery, a British general, was he was the first one to propose a first state solution right before I think it was right after World War I. Anyway, they went from, even before Israel was granted statehood, they went from like just a few thousand Jewish people to Jewish people making up like 25 or 30% of the area, the population. And the Palestinians were not happy about this, because imagine, like what happens to them. Like, people don't really look at it from their side. And you've had this farm in your land for 6 generations or 10 generations, and then one day some dude comes up and says, hey, I own this land now. And you're like, I never sold you my land. And it's like, no, the owner did. And you're like, I'm the owner. You don't even know what's going on. And all of a sudden, some guy shows up at your house telling you he owns your house now. And he legally owns your house, even though you never legally sold your house. Wouldn't you be a little bit pissed off if that happened? I think I would be. But, the Palestinian side is that their lands and their rights were sold to other people without them having any say in it. From the Jews' side, they didn't insist on that area. What the Jews were like, give us anywhere. They're like, give us Central Africa. We don't care where it is. Just give us any place on the earth, and we will go live there. That will make that our homeland. They did not insist on Jerusalem or anything like that, which is another thing I think people don't understand. Is and so it's like, I think there's a lot of, they're both, they're both at fault. Like in some ways you can say they are both at fault, and that they are both have done things that are wrong, like both sides. But both sides have been wronged too. Like, Jewish people have a long history of being persecuted and wronged. The Palestinians who never sold their homes were persecuted and wronged. Neither side is 100% wrong, and neither side is 100% right. And that's what nobody understands about this conflict, is both sides have a reason to believe they are in the right. And most, there's not a lot of honest conversation about this. It's like, I hear all the time, oh, it's about Isaac and Ishmael or something like that. It's not. There was not enmity for most of that time. We went 2,000 years without there being an issue between those two. It's only after people from outside started buying land from people that didn't own it. If you really want to blame anybody, blame the Ottoman Empire. But we're kind of, a little late on that, because it doesn't exist anymore.